Our movie today is about Friddle Island, which has princes, princesses, and magical beasts. Merlin starts telling us about the 7 greatest heroes on the island, and he was one of them. Merlin says that the island was attacked by a huge dragon, but they were able to defeat it. Suddenly, a princess appeared, but she was not as beautiful as the princesses. Merlin and the 7 heroes thought she was an evil witch and attacked her, but she was a fairy princess and decided to punish them by turning them into 7 strange-looking dwarves. This curse is broken as soon as the most beautiful woman in the world kisses them. At that moment, a queen appears standing in front of a gray tree and talks to her, asking her for the shoes of beauty and eternal youth. Suddenly, we find one of these red apples turned into a shoes, and the queen puts it on. She actually turns into a very beautiful girl, but quickly returns to how she was. The queen gets angry with her and says to her, "How long will I wait?" Then a girl appears and enters the place and finds the gray tree, and is looking for something, and opens the drawers and pictures. But suddenly, one of the queen's servants comes and enters the place, so the girl runs to hide and sees the rope from which the girl came down. But he does not care, and walks away. The girl goes back to look and finds the book she was looking for and takes it, and sees in the book the story of Snow White that tells her about what happened at her birthday party when she was 18 years old. At that time, the witch comes, but she is very beautiful and her name is Regina, and she marries Snow White's father. At that time, everything was perfect until people started to disappear one after the other, until her father knew from the magic mirror she had with her and saw her talking to the gray tree. But her father decided to send Snow White away and told her that as soon as she sees him and finds this book, she will try to reach the 7 heroes and makes them save her, and the girl decides to approach the gray tree and takes the shoes that is on it and turns to a very beautiful girl who is Snow White. And the queen suddenly intervenes with her guards and they try to catch her, but she takes her magic wand and flies with her outside the kingdom. So Queen Regina gets very angry. At that time, the queen was asking her magic mirror and saying, "Who is the most beautiful one in the kingdom?" The mirror told her the girl wearing the red shoes. So the witch gets upset and makes her guards distribute flyers all over the city and search for Snow White and bring her back. We find the 7 heroes appear again, and they are talking to each other. They find something flying above them and they go after it, and they hear the sound from their house, and when they enter they are amazed by Snow White's beauty, but one of them comes from behind her and hits her, so she falls to the ground. They continue looking at her and say, "It is impossible for anyone to be that beautiful. How did she get here?" Snow White wakes up and is afraid of the strange appearance of the 7 heroes, but she keeps apologizing to them that she entered their house because she was hungry. Snow White looks in the mirror and does not recognize herself because she has become very beautiful and her body is proportionate. She asks if they see her like that too. They tell her that she is very beautiful like an angel and ask her about her name, but she lies and tells them that her name is Red Shoes Owner. They tell her that she is definitely a princess, not an ordinary girl. Merlin introduces himself to her and the rest of his brothers, Chalcot, Hans, Arthur, Benno, Noki, and Quay. Snow White tells them it is impossible. Your names are like the names of the 7 heroes, and she is looking for the 7 heroes because she wants to find her father. So Merlin tells her that they are not the 7 heroes and that they know her well. He told her that they can help her find her father. Each one of them offered to find her father sooner than the other so that she would love him. Merlin tells her that you do not have a chance except us because the 7 heroes disappeared a year ago and are no longer present. Snow White thanks them for helping her and that they are good and that she does not see that they look bad or anything, and Merlin said that this is definitely the beautiful one who will break the curse they are under. At that moment, Prince Offwork appears and is angry because the servants do not know how to bring a single famous princess to attend his birthday party. Suddenly, the witch Regina appears and gives him a picture of Snow White and tells him that she can attend the party with him, but he is the one who is looking for her and brings her. Because she stole the shoe, she runs away and Offwork agrees. Then Snow White draws a picture of her father and looks at the mirror and says, "He definitely won't recognize me in this new character." She takes off her shoes and returns to her old form again, but one of the dwarves knocks on her, so she puts her shoes back on and opens them. He offers her if she wants to do a face mask with him, but she doesn't agree and tells him that she wants to sleep. She looks out her window and sees something in the forest. She thinks of her father and goes out into the forest alone. The 7 heroes were as they were, but as soon as Snow White looks at them, they become dwarves again. While Snow White is in the forest, she sees a huge rabbit, and Merlin comes to save her, electrocutes him, catches her hands, and they run together. He tells her that this is magic with him and turns into a handsome young man again, but as soon as she looks at him, he becomes a dwarf again, but he is still behind them, this huge rabbit. Merlin asks her not to look behind her, so he can attack the rabbit in his normal form, but she looks at him and he turns back into a dwarf again and the rabbit stomps on him. Arthur comes to help them, but as soon as she looks at him, he turns back into a dwarf and doesn't know how to help them, and falls. Arthur keeps pretending to be injured in order to steal Snow White's heart. Arthur tells her that she can't go into the forest alone because it's dangerous, and if she needs anything, he's strong and brave and will be with her. Snow White thanks him, but Arthur asks her to kiss him, so she hits him and leaves. The next day, Snow White gives them a picture of her father so they can look for him. The clever Arthur makes a plan to go out with Snow White, so she falls in love with him, and the curse is broken. Merlin stays at home guarding the rabbit they caught and bargains with the rabbit for some carrots in exchange for him going out on his back and going after the rest of the dwarves. They go looking for her father, and Snow White keeps asking the people walking about her father, and everyone who sees her is amazed by her beauty. But suddenly she looks and finds a paper with her picture on it, and that she is wanted. The guards of Offwork see her and run after her. She takes off her shoes and returns to her normal form. They do not recognize her and walk and leave her. The city guards come and take her red shoes and throw it at each other, and Snow White asks them to return her shoes back. They refuse, and at the same time the dwarves are looking for her and see her, but in her old form, so they walk and don't help her, until Merlin comes and electrocutes them all and returns her shoes and asks her if they have seen each other before. She says no, and Merlin walks. Snow White is surprised by his behavior and puts her shoes back on and walks again, and the guards of Offwork see her, and Merlin takes her to the huge rabbit, and they run away from them. They return to their place, and Merlin asks her why the guards were running after her. Snow White tells him that her shoes are made of magic and that they want these shoes. Merlin gets the idea to draw a picture of her father with roses and writes, "We hope to communicate." Snow White thanks Merlin, and he thinks that she will kiss him, but she blows roses on his face. Then, Offwork's guards come and see a picture of Snow White's father and know where the princess is. At that moment, we find Merlin and Hans fighting because each one of them is ruining his relationship with Snow White. Arthur tells Merlin that he is nothing without his magic. Suddenly, a net is thrown at them and Offwork's guards come out. At that moment, Hans was preparing sweets for the princess, and Jack offers her the diamond ring, but she refuses to accept it. Suddenly, they find Offwork and his guards standing outside the house. He asks them to hand Snow White over. Snow White goes out. All the guards fall for her beauty, and Prince Offwork is amazed and says that her appearance is very angelic, and asks them to leave Arthur and Merlin and release them. Offwork tells them that she must attend his birthday, and that this is a royal order. We find Snow White hitting Offwork. The guards go to catch her, but the 7 dwarves decide to defend Princess Snow White. Each one of them uses his magic and attacks the guards. They are able to protect her in the end after the house falls on Offwork and the guards. Offwork tells them that he will come back again. At night, Snow White sits with Merlin, and they keep talking to each other, and he tells her that his real appearance is prettier, and that he is also handsome. Snow White tells him that his real appearance does not matter to her, and that she loves him even if he is a dwarf, and Snow White tries to take off her shoes so that he can see her real appearance, but she does not know how. So Merlin tries to help her by all means, but fails. Then we find Regina the witch. And Regina. Offwork is upset and yells because he can't bring Snow White and tells him you still have another chance to bring her and make his birthday special, and leaves him 3 magic apples. He eats them for the 2 guards, and they turn into huge tree trunks. At that time, the dwarves. Snow White were fixing their house after it was destroyed, and Benno, Quay, and Noki is 3 dwarves who look alike, made a huge invention out of wood that helped them get their house back and restore it again, and also a machine that can make huge copies of the pictures of her father that Snow White drew. Merlin thought of installing the magic wand in their invention so they can distribute the pictures all over the city. Snow White is very happy with them and hugs them, and Snow White flies with Merlin, and they live sweet moments together. She tells him that she is lucky to have met him, and they throw pictures of her father all over the city. Merlin keeps dreaming that Snow White is hugging him. Suddenly they bump into a tree and fall to the ground, and she wants to tell him about her enchanted shoes and her old appearance, and they keep talking to each other, and Merlin asks her to close her eyes and kiss her, and he thinks that he has returned to his handsome appearance again, and that the curse has been broken. Snow White opens her eyes and finds him as he is. He has not changed at all, and Merlin keeps wondering how he stayed the same even though Snow White is hugging him and she is the most beautiful girl in the world. Suddenly a monster appears in the form of a tree trunk, and it is Offwork and his guards, and they keep chasing them. Merlin asks Snow White to wait far away and not look at him. She promises him never to look at him, and he keeps fighting them, and Offwork falls into the water and calls Snow White, and she looks at him, and Offwork pulls Merlin. He falls with him in the water, and suddenly, without thinking, Snow White jumps into the water to save Merlin, and he is under a huge rock. Her shoes falls into the water, and the witch's guards see them and find the witch talking to the enchanted mirror and telling her to go herself and take the shoe from Snow White. At that moment, Merlin sees her real appearance without the shoe and is very upset. She keeps explaining to him that her real name is Snow White, and that her father is King White and was married to the evil witch, and she is the one who sent the monsters to take her shoe. She tells him that if she didn't have the shoe, he definitely wouldn't have helped her. Snow White falls asleep sadly, and Merlin goes for a walk and talks to himself and says that he loved the little red shoe. Not Snow White, but the little red shoe loved him while he was a dwarf, and his appearance didn't make a difference to her at all. Snow White puts on her shoe and keeps walking and thinks of her memories with Merlin. She sees him again and tells him that she remembered that he left. Merlin asks Snow White to take off her shoes. She doesn't know, and finds Merlin giving her an apple and asking her to eat it. Suddenly, the real Merlin comes from behind her and calls her, and it is the witch Regina, and she wanted to trick her to take the shoe. Suddenly, the witch kidnaps Snow White and takes her to the palace, and Merlin gets on the back of the huge rabbit and runs with it to save Snow White. Merlin leaves a message with the witch's guards for his friends to print many copies of his cards and go to help him, and the dwarves prepare themselves to go save Snow White and Merlin. Merlin enters inside the palace, and the witch is holding Snow White and asks her to eat the apple. Snow White asks the witch, Regina, about the location of her father, but she refuses to tell her. Merlin enters them, but he is holding his hands, and Regina asks Snow White to eat the apple. Either Merlin is killed and Snow White chooses to eat the apple and begins. The mirror turns, and it is the one that binds Merlin. Merlin asks her what will happen to Snow White, and the mirror tells him that she will turn into an enchanted red apple tree, and that these apples will turn into magic shoes, and Regina will wear them to make her the most beautiful in the whole town. He asks her about Snow White's fate. She tells him that she will wither and die. Merlin frees himself and tries to escape, but she is able to catch him and binds him again. The rest of the dwarves enter and save Merlin and fight the enchanted mirror. The witch is standing in front of Snow White, who has turned into a tree and is waiting for the sunrise to obtain eternal beauty. Merlin jumps on the witch and makes her fall from the palace and uses his magic to destroy her. Everything returns to the way it was, and everyone returns to normal. And Snow White hugs her father and asks about Merlin, and he tells her that he sacrificed himself to get rid of Regina the witch. Snow White keeps calling him and crying. Suddenly, Merlin appears, but he's unable to speak and he looks completely messed up. He tells her that she is the most beautiful girl in the world, and Snow White hugs him and kisses him. Merlin returns to his handsome appearance again. They get married, and the city lives in warmth and peace again until here our movie ends. Bye.